All right, I want to thank everybody for being here today. This bill that we are introducing seeks to right decades of wrong and end unnecessary marijuana laws. Currently, right now, our veterans are prohibited from getting the medical treatment they so desperately need to relieve their pain and suffering. Parents are unable to get the medical treatment their children need to relieve their pain and suffering. High-trained officials in our country, doctors and scientists, medical personnel, are unable to prescribe and recommend drugs that could alleviate the pain and suffering of their patients. Otherwise, law-abiding Americans, bankers, business people, veterans, families are fearful of unnecessary, expensive, life-disrupting investigations and prosecutions. Today, we join together to say enough is enough. Our federal government has long overstepped the boundaries of common sense, fiscal prudence, and compassion with its marijuana laws. These laws must change. I feel very fortunate today to be standing with two senators who are my partners in this effort to end marijuana laws as they exist and adversely affect our citizens when it comes to their medical needs. And I want to thank from the bottom of my heart the partnership and leadership, really, of Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. She has been extraordinary on this issue. And I also want to thank my partner on this issue and others, Senator Rand Paul. Both of their leadership and courage on this issue is a reason we are here today. But I want to have you look to our left and right, and you can see, more importantly, what compels us to the podium today and to introduce this legislation. I'd like to now ask Senator Paul to come up and give some brief remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Booker, and thank you, Senator Gilbrand, for coming today, and all of you. We, as a society, are changing our opinions on restricting people's choices as far as medical treatments. And there are thousands of people in our country, probably tens of thousands of people in our country, who have diseases that are incurable and that would like to seek palliative treatment. Many people have been finding relief, but some people are prevented from having that. The laws aren't uniform, and there are still federal laws that prevent states, even states that have legalized medical marijuana. A little over 20 states have medical marijuana, and yet there are still federal rules that make it difficult. I just came back from Colorado, and the biggest thing they were asking me is, we want banking to be legal. We're legitimate enterprises now. We want to be able to put our money in a bank. My guess is that even more tax money will be paid if they're allowed to keep their money in banks and not brown bags. So I think there's every reason to try to give more ease to people in the states who want this, more freedom for states and individuals. Doctors who want to prescribe this, it's very difficult because it's Schedule I. We want to take it down to Schedule II so doctors can prescribe this more easily. We don't want doctors to be punished for simply trying to help people. I'm glad to be part of this effort. I think that there's great potential for research in this as well. Research has been prevented somewhat by this also. When it's Schedule I, it's virtually impossible to research. Is the proof always there? We don't know because we can't do the research, but I'm in favor of allowing the research to occur. We know of many instances where people have gotten palliative help from this, and I'm glad to be part of this effort. And we've done a lot. I've done a lot of effort across the aisle with Senator Booker and Senator Gillibrand, and I think this is an example of how Washington works. And I'd like to right now introduce my friend Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
I'm very grateful to be here with my colleagues, Senator Booker and Senator Paul, are extraordinary advocates on this and other issues. I'm really here to talk about some families in New York that I met. One of them's here, Kate Hintz and her daughter Morgan. You can see Morgan, and she is a little girl who has a very serious disease. And many children in my state have similar afflictions, and they feel the real pain of the current federal laws as it relates to medicine that their doctors have prescribed. Kate, our mom, she is not a full-time political advocate. She's a full-time mom trying to do the right thing and to help her child get the medicine that would ease her chronic pain. Kate and Morgan sacrificed a lot to be here. It is not easy to get here. And they are simply asking Congress to do its job, to take care of America's kids. Across the country, state lawmakers have already recognized what medical research is showing us, that cannabis can treat a variety of illnesses, from MS to cancer to epilepsy to seizures. Medical marijuana is legal in 23 states, plus the District of Columbia. 12 other states have laws permitting the use of cannabidiol, which is CBD. It's a strain of medical marijuana that has almost no THC and doesn't cause a high. This is the medicine that so many parents have been prescribed for their children who have these seizures, daily seizures, hundreds of seizures that actually prevent these children's brains from developing fully and living the fullest life they can. Instead, the federal laws threaten prosecution of the patients, of the doctors, the providers who participate in medical marijuana programs. And these laws, as Senator Paul said, severely restrict the scientific research of medical marijuana. They prevent the transparent financing for medical marijuana dispensaries, forcing providers to rely on dangerous cash-only businesses. These laws ignore the health benefits of medical marijuana. This is clearly a case of ideology getting in the way of scientific progress. The government should not prevent doctors from prescribing medicine that has shown to work. And the government should not block families from accessing treatment that would ease their children's suffering. Under current law, patients and doctors are forced to either forego necessary care, which Morgan has to do, or use alternatives that often have severe side effects. And those who do obtain medical marijuana risk arrest from federal authorities, even if they're in compliance with state laws. As the families told me when I visited them in New York, they aren't just afraid of prosecution. They're afraid of a knock on the door from Child Services, coming to take their children away, all because they chose to give their children the medicine that doctors have prescribed. Senator Booker and Paul and I are introducing this new bill, the CARERS Act, which would recognize that marijuana has accepted medical uses and would recognize the will of voters in 23 states that have decided that denying families access is wrong. The bipartisan bill would finally allow patients and families, including veterans, in those 23 states to access medical care without fear of prosecution. It also reschedules medical marijuana to a Schedule II drug as opposed to a Schedule I drug, which is what, as Senator Paul said, would allow more research. It would also lift bureaucratic restraints so that this research can be conducted across the country and by CDC. We need to modernize our laws, and there are too many stories like the ones I heard just a few weeks ago. An 8-year-old boy named Donnie, who has since died of brain cancer. Instead of being allowed to take small doses of medical marijuana, which would have provided relief and reduced anxiety more effectively, he was stuck taking powerful opiates, which weren't always effective, and left her unaware of her surroundings. Or Oliver, who I just met, a little boy whose life is interrupted by over 100 seizures a day. Those seizures impair his life and impair his cognitive development. If he was able to have small doses of medical marijuana, it would stop his seizures and allow Oliver to live his life more fully. Instead, he has to take powerful barbiturates, which are addictive and not always effective. Now, Morgan, Kate's daughter here, she has Dravet, which is a syndrome that has a very rare form of epilepsy that has no known cure. I've met several children that have this disease. Even though there's a growing scientific consensus that medical marijuana actually helps control these seizures, Morgan's mother would have to violate laws and risk arrest just to give her daughter the medicine she needs. So these stories are not, they're not the only ones. And I urge my colleagues to support the CARERS Act. It gives the parents the ability and option to treat these diseases more effectively and to ease their children's pain more effectively. Now I'd like to introduce Kate Hintz, and she's one of our best advocates on this issue. Come on over, Kate.
Good afternoon. My name is Kate Hintz. This is my daughter, Morgan. We live in North Salem, New York. As you can see, we don't travel very far or go for very long without Morgan having a seizure. She just had a very mild one while Senator Gillibrand was speaking. So I am very happy to be here today supporting this bill. I am a stay-at-home mom from New York. I am not an advocate, so to speak, as you mentioned. We've been advocating for access to medical marijuana for almost 2 years now. Morgan is 4 years old, and she suffers from a severe form of epilepsy called Dravet syndrome. She has seizures almost every single day. Her seizures started at 9 weeks old. Upon her first admission to the hospital, she was started on an anticonvulsant medication. Within 10 days, we had added a second. Within a month, they had added a third, and I was forced to watch as Morgan became unresponsive and lifeless from sedation. What doctors didn't tell us is that over 30% of epilepsy patients have seizures that cannot be controlled with treatment. Morgan depends on a feeding tube because she cannot eat or take her medicines by mouth. She cannot sit, stand, or crawl independently. She does not speak and requires constant supervision from a nurse. She has trialed and failed over 10 different anti-seizure medications, yet at best, Morgan has only ever gone 4 weeks seizure-free. At this point, we will never know what has affected her more, her uncontrolled seizures or the mountains of medications she has taken in her short life. There are thousands of families in the U.S. living under similar circumstances, some patients having 1 seizure a day and some having hundreds. But some of these families are living in states with existing medical marijuana programs. And because they too had trialed almost every available medication, they decided to try something new. Medical marijuana that is selectively grown for specific cannabidiol profiles are proving to be a safe and effective treatment in treatment-resistant epilepsies. So promising are the results, most of the leading children's hospitals in the U.S. are involved with some sort of a CBD clinical trial. This news spread like wildfire through the epilepsy community. The momentum to gain access has been unprecedented. Many families instantly picked up their belongings and headed to Colorado and are now dubbed marijuana refugees. Other families have quietly begun to travel back and forth, transporting medication across state lines to their children and loved ones, and thus committing a federal crime. Some families like mine turn to our state government for help, and although a few states have successfully passed medical marijuana bills, most of them are fragmented, overthought, and overregulated because they have no guidance on a federal level. Today, with the introduction of this bill, that can change. Individual state programs will never succeed until they are supported at a federal level. Across the country, advocates have been waiting to see who would take the first step, who would listen to our stories, our struggles, our confusion, and realize that enough was enough. And today we have our answer. Senators Paul, Gillibrand, and Booker, from the millions of epilepsy patients living in the U.S., thank you for ignoring the stigma and instead focusing on finding us a solution. Thank you.
Very well said. Thank you. Good job.
So grateful for that. As I said before, the voices of the families and our veterans and others affected are the most powerful to the common sense of this legislation. I'd like to now introduce a New Jersey resident, Sandy Fiora, and she is a medical marijuana patient and incredible, courageous advocate.
Yeah, I'm good. All right, thank you. Thank you. I am Sandy Fiora, and I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 1988. I came to use medical marijuana because of the trouble I had sleeping. In the early stages of my illness, I did not sleep for about 4 years, and no prescription drugs were of any help. I was in my mid-30s and at my wit's end when I remembered that the reason I did not smoke marijuana in college was because it made me fall asleep. So I obtained some and tried it. The next thing I knew, it was morning, and I cried when I woke up. Finally, a natural medicine that not only solved my insomnia, but also turned out to allay my daily nausea, which is comparable to chronic chemotherapy or morning sickness. It also helped with my neuralgia, which other prescription drugs had failed to conquer. So now I have a medicine that's answered my prayers, but I have yet another problem. How do I get it? Where do I get it legally and affordably? Even if it is now finally legal for patients in New Jersey, I am restricted by the federal policy. Whenever I need to find medicine and medicate myself outside of the New Jersey system, I put myself, my family, and my friends at risk. There is an urgent need for this change. Every minute the bill is passed, the bill is not passed, not only am I and others at jeopardy, but it means the others with needs that are not getting their medicine because of cost, accessibility, and fear. To me, that's the real crime. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You know, I think we all are persuaded somewhat by the intellectual arguments, but also the emotion of this tugs at your heart. And when I began looking into the issue, I became aware that my political director in my office, his father-in-law, suffers from multiple sclerosis and was using medical marijuana. And I'd like him to come forward and talk a little bit about, you know, how it's helped him and what problems that he's encountered. John Rossi.
Good afternoon. My name is John Rossi. In 1991, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I've been through many types of treatment for the disease. At this point, the type of MS that I have is not curable. Of course, none of it's curable, but it's not even treatable. They have many treatments for MS, but none for secondary progressive, which is what I have. In addition to the loss of mobility and loss of sensation, I suffered pain and spasms throughout my body. And in order to treat this, doctors would give me narcotic pain relievers and muscle relaxers, which worked in the short term, but you soon become accustomed to it, and the relief is not there. But I lived in Arizona at the time, and Arizona has medical marijuana, and I found that when I availed myself of it, I was able to mitigate the problems of the pain and the spasming. And so I was no longer addicted to narcotics, and I was able to deal with the issues that I had. But now I live in Northern Virginia, and I don't have access to the medicine that would really do me better. And because it's against the law. And so since Virginia has not sought a way around the federal prohibition, this option is not available to me. I believe the decision to use medical marijuana should be between the patient and the doctor. I don't believe the government should be involved in this at all. The federal government should remove the obstacles to the use of medical marijuana for doctors, patients, and also for businesses who might make the medical marijuana available to patients. In addition, I believe that changing the federal law would enable more research to be done. And I believe that this is a change that can only help doctors and patients. And I want to thank the senators for this act, and I just hope that we're successful. Thank you.
There's another aspect of our legislation that is critically important and passionately believed in by Senators Gillibrand and Senator Paul, as well as myself, and that's VA hospitals right now, even in states that have passed medical marijuana laws. VA hospitals will not make it available to our veterans who stood for us, who have fought for us, who have sacrificed for us, and who are now suffering as a result of their service. I'd like to bring forward right now one such veteran from New Jersey, T.J. Thompson, who served in the U.S. Navy from 1998 through 2004. T.J.?
Good morning. I'm T.J. Thompson, resident of Chesapeake, Virginia, in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. I'm a father, a husband, an employee, and a criminal in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm also a criminal in the United States of America, the country I decided to volunteer 6 years of my life to stand up and fight for freedoms, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. I greatly value the pursuit of happiness, especially being a father. My kids do not want to have a criminal for a father. They want to have a father that can enjoy their lives with them, that can take I could be able to take my son to basketball games, be able to go out and enjoy my daughter's orchestra concerts. Before I decided to start medicating with marijuana, I was unable to do that stuff. A few years ago, I went through a really, really bad bout. I guess it was the crash in 2008 really set my family on the downward spiral. I hit really bad depression. I've dealt with suicidal and homicidal thoughts, suicidal tendencies since I've been 21 years old. I'm now 35. This legislation is definitely needed for veterans as well as all patients across the United States of America. On behalf of the 20 million plus veterans in this country, I thank Senators Gillibrand, Paul, and Booker for this legislation. The Department of Veterans Affairs only covers 8.76 million veterans. That means that over half of our nation's veterans are not registered with the Veterans Health Administration. When you hear the number 22 veteran suicides a day, we do not know for a fact that that number is accurate. It could be much higher. This legislation is necessary to pass immediately. It respects First Amendment rights between veterans and their doctors within the Veterans Health Administration. Right now, veterans are censored from speaking openly to their doctors about all treatment options such as medical marijuana. It also allows the VA to do research and development. The first federally approved study is for non-treatable post-traumatic stress disorder in veterans, and the state of Colorado has decided to assist with funding in that. The group that I work with, Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access, has established an open and working relationship with the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Veteran Health Administration. We ask that this be looked at as a very monumental step forward for veterans and all patients who would benefit from safe legal access to medical marijuana. Veterans, us as veterans, have volunteered our time to protect the rights and freedoms that make this country great. Today, we call upon our elected leaders across the country to respect our rights to heal. We remind you that it is your duty as elected officials to fix this very large gap in the Veterans Health Administration and fix a system that has failed us 20+ million veterans. We say all elected officials, state and federal, need to approve comprehensive medical cannabis legislation immediately. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, TJ, and I apologize for claiming you as a New Jerseyan, but as everybody who just heard you speak like a New Jerseyan. Yeah, you're very welcome.
I prefer Virginia.
Okay. All right, I'd like to introduce our final speaker before we take some questions. And this is an owner of District Growers, LLC, Corey Barnett.
My name is Corey Barnett. I'm the owner and operator of District Growers. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about what businesses trying to service the vulnerable, businesses trying to provide medicine to patients face as a result of the current legislative environment in our country. Currently, we have absolutely no access to the banking system. What does that really mean? It doesn't really sound like a big problem on its surface, but when you go deeper, it can be very substantial. That means that we're storing typically large amounts of cash on site, which is a huge security issue, and oftentimes put the people that would seek to visit dispensaries at risk, as well as the people working there at risk. Otherwise, simple tasks present huge hurdles and significant burdens. For example, making cash payments every month to everything, well, to everyone for everything. That is including the security company, the telephone company, the landlord, the insurance, payroll, utility companies, your accountant, and every other service provider that you do business with, you pretty much pay in cash. Some would suggest that you should use your personal accounts and then reimburse yourself from your business. This also doesn't work. That means that you're then taking $75,000 in cash into a bank and trying to make a deposit. It doesn't work. You can't take 10 payments a month of $7,500, not 15 payments of $5,000. To do so would be to label yourself as someone with suspicious activity, simply because you are doing something suspicious. There's no debt financing. There's no working capital. There are no credit cards. There are no corporate debit cards. That means that you don't buy anything over the internet. You can't use PayPal. You can't use any of the other service providers out there. There are no plane tickets to send your employees to training sessions or conferences. There are no office supplies that when you show up at the register in Office Depot, you're pulling out a roll of 20s, and the person is looking at you like you're a criminal. All of the other common practices that businesses are able to enjoy as a result of just having access to the banking system are something that plague our industry. We can't do that. It prevents us from being able to actually get the medicine to the people that you've heard today. It prevents us from being able to actually provide the product in a quality manner, in a safe manner, and in a way that gives people the opportunity to treat their illnesses with dignity. Our federal government shouldn't do that. They shouldn't prevent the businesses from being able to service the patients. And it is my hope that all senators in our government will stand with the three here today and actually move this bill forward and actually get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. I'd like to invite Senator Paul back towards the podium, and we'd like to take questions, either the three legislators before you or any of the people, the courageous people that spoke. Questions?
Paul was talking about how attitudes are quickly changing across the country. Do you expect that has translated here, and do you expect a lot of resistance to this legislation, or is that wave hitting here as well?
I think across the board, not only this, but the way we treat these problems or even justice in general. You know, they had a medical marijuana vote in Florida, and I think it was, 56, 58%, didn't get to 60, but it got pretty close. The majority of people in Florida were for this. And I think if you ask people now, do you really think somebody who has MS, who's confined to a wheelchair, if you don't believe in medical marijuana, you believe in putting that person in jail if they get marijuana. So if one of these patients up here takes marijuana in the states where it's illegal, they would go to jail. Ask people that question, are you in favor of that? And I think you'll find that overwhelmingly people are not in favor of that. So I think society is changing their, their attitudes on it. A good example, which is sort of related but a little bit distant, is in California we did Proposition 47, which takes some minor felonies and makes them misdemeanors. The prisons are wide open now. And you know what? The violent criminals are able to stay their whole sentence now. So there's a lot of advantages to separating out nonviolent from violent. And I think we are changing on this.
A question for, Dr. Paul or other senators. If marijuana became Schedule 2, how many years until it becomes available in pharmacies throughout the country and covered by the health insurance?
Doctor?
I don't think I know the answer to it, but I think Schedule 2 helps a lot of things because I think with Schedule 1 it's virtually impossible. I think a few doctors can get the ability to do Schedule 1. I think I could always do Schedule 2, but I don't think I was ever on schedule or had a reason to be on Schedule 1. It was just too hard to do. And so a few doctors who probably do methadone clinics or whatever maybe Schedule 1. But so it will make it much easier to dispense, but it's also for research. Universities can't get involved in research. And the thing is that there still is a lot that's unknown. The people who are doing this, I think it's also important to say that I don't think anybody up here is against traditional medicine. They've probably tried every traditional medicine and probably still do try traditional medicines, but when it fails and it's not working, they want to be tried something else, and we actually can't do the adequate studies to give them information, whether it's a good treatment or a bad treatment, because we make it illegal for even research.
Do you want to add to that, Senator Gillibrand?
Well, I want to talk about the treatment of these kids. So they take an oil, it's called CBD oil. It doesn't have any of the effects that smoking a marijuana cigarette would have in terms of altering their perception. It's actually something that stops their seizures. It is a medical treatment that has a medical effect. And when a child doesn't have 100 seizures a day, their brain can actually develop and they can grow. They can have more moments with their families, with their friends. They can develop emotionally. That isn't possible if you're having 100 seizures a day. So we have to understand, just as we researched opiates and opiates are a part of lots of painkillers in our medicine, we don't have that same level of research with marijuana. We don't have the same level of research to see how can this oil be put in medicines for treatment of disease. And so I think the science must be allowed to speak for itself. And these patients need this medicine. It's outrageous that is not allowed to take it. It is outrageous that any parent should be worried about social services knocking on their door because they're giving their child the medicine that the doctor says the child needs.
Yes.
A political question. Any indication that there are other senators ready to move on this? And what about the House?
Oh. Well, we're going to approach all our colleagues. This is the first step of a long process of advocacy, and we're going to speak to people in the House. I know there's supporters in the House, and I'm very hopeful that we will have significant support in the Senate. I dare any senator to meet these patients here and say to them they don't deserve the medicine that their doctors prescribed.
Just for the record, Senator Gillibrand is not shy about encouraging her colleagues. Yes, sir.
I have. I've asked the Department of Justice, specifically Attorney General Holder, to sign a waiver for these patients. Because if they have to wait 18 months for New York's law to go into full effect, they're not going to get the medicine they need now. And so asking a patient like Morgan to take a different medicine that doesn't have the medical benefits that this CBD oil does is not a solution. Asking her to be a trial to a drug that she may already tried but doesn't address her needs is not a solution. So I'm asking the Attorney General to act now.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Just reschedule marijuana altogether or only medical marijuana in Schedule 2?
I think it would be just medical.
In medical marijuana.
Medical marijuana, so other types of pot would still be Schedule 1?
No.
No, it would reschedule all of marijuana to be Schedule 2. And Schedule 2 is just the definition is the drug has a high potential for abuse. The drug has a currently accepted medical use in treatment in the United States or a currently accepted medical use with severe restrictions. So it's basically saying this drug can now be studied. This drug can now be assessed for medical use. In the same, you have to look at it in the same way that opiates are. They are a very powerful drug, but they are used for medical uses. Going to smoke in an opium den is not legal, but the drug itself can be analyzed, studied, and prescribed through, codone and other medicines that everyday people have access to when they have severe pain.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And we make room over here for these folks to be able to get out.